Welcome to this World Satsanga, held on the 28th of August 2024, in conjunction with Kevin Moore and the Kevin Moore Show. And as usual, I encourage you to visit his YouTube channel, the Kevin Moore Show, where he's investigating all sorts of different individuals who channel information and access information from the greater reality and broadcast it to ourselves. So this lecture is actually quite an educational lecture in terms of understanding how to connect with the greater reality and how not to connect with the greater reality. There are a lot of individuals who basically take drugs, LSD, crystal meth, crack cocaine, etc., 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 including magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, and a plethora of other different psychedelics. And the whole point of these is to try to gain a level of expansive consciousness through the use of the drugs. Shamans and other guru types and druids in the past used to use all sorts of different ways to create a focus, such as dancing or experiencing other sorts of focus, to create the possibility of detaching themselves from the physical reality to contact the greater reality that we normally exist within. And some of those things were to use various forms of natural herbs and other forms of plants that created a function similar to some of the pharmaceuticals we have today that are classified as psychedelic. Now, the interesting thing with this is that although they do create a possibility where we experience different realities or different aspects of the physical universe, they basically only take the individual out to a certain level. Now then, the issue with drugs is that they create a dysfunction or a disharmony within the physical body. And although we experience levels of expanding consciousness or observation of different levels or different environments associated with the different frequencies within the physical universe in our locale, which is the Earth, these basically create a condition where we are out of harmony with the body. So our soul has to get out. So the drugs themselves don't actually create the expansive consciousness. They create a condition, a temporary condition, a rather mechanical condition, where the soul, or the smaller aspect of your true energetic self, we sometimes call it the higher self or the Godhead or the Oversoul, all those things mean the same thing, that larger volume of sentience that is the real you, has to get out of the temporary vehicle that it's experiencing, learning and evolving from in a particular low frequency environment. In this instance, it's the Earth. So I'll explain the process of what happens, because I think it's important to know the exact process rather than bits and pieces of the process, because this can also happen with alcohol as well. And I'll explain an example of how alcohol can achieve a similar thing, but can also achieve a rather unexpected thing as well. So when we take drugs, psychedelic drugs with the expectation of gaining expanded consciousness, what actually happens is that the drugs themselves create a condition in the physical form where the physical form is dragged down the frequencies rather severely. And in being dragged down the frequencies rather severely, it goes out of harmony with the soul that is occupying it. Now, the soul has created a harmonious condition with the body from the point of conception or inception, even before conception. And that level of harmony is if you like, a key. It allows the soul to stay with the body, and it's something the body's associated with. And that's where when we have walk-ins, the walk-in has to be a pre-arranged walk-in where that soul who occupies or swaps over with the previous occupying or primarily animating soul is the same sort of frequency. So one soul moves in, the soul moves out, and the harmony between the two souls is equal, so that the body doesn't reject the second soul. And again, I'll explain a little bit of this function when we talk about alcohol. So the taking of drugs, whether it's orally or intravenously creates a rapid loss of frequency in the body. It creates a disharmonious effect between the body and the soul that's integrated with it, and the soul just has to get out. It's a little bit like diving into freezing water. You know, you have to get out because it's too cold. An opposite effect would be diving into boiling water or boiling oil. You have to get out. So the soul has to get out. Now, there's all sorts of comments about the good trip and the bad trip. And the good trip and the bad trip are associated with how disharmonious the body is to the soul, as to how far the soul is ejected. So the soul, with the so-called good trip, is really moving out so fast because the body becomes so disharmonious it has to get out. It moves up and beyond the gross physical frequencies into the fourth frequency. It goes up into the sixth and seventh frequencies, which are the upper astral levels, the lower upper astral and the upper astral. And so when souls go into that level, they get the so-called good trip, because entities that are either incarnate at that level or disincarnate at that level, and even astral entities, which then there's not many at that level, I have to say, are more benevolent and more observationally nice to see, so to speak. They're not abhorrent to us. So we get the so-called good feeling. We feel expanded consciousness because we're in a higher frequency. We get a feeling of communion because we're in a higher frequency. And we get a feeling of oneness because we're in a higher frequency. But it can't last long because the body does adjust eventually, and the drugs are flushed through the body, and eventually they leave the body through either through being voided through urine or through feces. So the body does eventually sort itself out, but it does take some hours. So the so-called good trip is when a body is so disharmonious that the soul goes along, it's like really catapulted out, and it goes to these higher frequencies, the two highest frequencies associated with the higher astral levels, the sixth and seventh. However, if it's not so disharmonious, but still disharmonious enough for the soul to get out, it can only get to the fourth level, for instance. And in the fourth level, we have incarnate souls at that level who are still there, who are in either human bodies or other bodies that are still incarnation, but it's just in the slightly higher frequency where we would ascend to, basically. But there are some incarnate vehicles that are again abhorrent to us. So we start to see things like the incarnate vehicles that look like mantis or spiders, or mixes of crabs and spiders, or other like lizard-like creatures. So we start to see those, and also we start to see astral entities who also have abhorrent images, abhorrent body form factors, because they tend to not want to be seen. And the way to not want to be seen is to present to us something that we fear. So they look into our memory set, our energies, that's our memory, and they say, this person's afraid of snakes. And so if you're afraid of snakes, you tend to look away, don't you? So in that instance, the individual would look away or not want to see the snake, but would see the snake because it's part of the frequency that they're in temporarily. And that would be abhorrence. And that would be the fear factor associated with seeing things that we don't like or we're scared of, would create the so-called bad trip. So the soul stays there while the body is disharmonious or returns to a level of harmony. It still might be disharmonious, but returns to a level of harmony that the soul can actually reintegrate with the body with. So basically what we have here is the taking of drugs effectively ejects the soul, because the soul cannot stay there because the body is so disharmonious. Now, if we get a condition where we overdose and the body dies whilst the soul's been ejected, then the soul is affected by that. And the soul has to go into a sort of like a quarantine area where the energies associated with the disharmony, the disharmonious effect of the drugs in the physical form, causing the demise of the physical form, have to be neutralized. And that has to be done by the true energetic self, usually with the help of the guide and helpers, but can take quite some time. But it does create a condition where the true energetic self cannot allow that soul, that smaller aspect of itself, back into communion with it until it's reached a state of reharmonizing its own energies and frequencies associated with the true energetic self, rather than this disharmonious state associated with the drugs. So it's not just a problem when you're physically incarnate. It's also a problem when you leave the body, specifically if you leave the body as a function of an overdose. Alcohol is a lower form of drug. In effect, it's obviously some people take drugs on a recreational perspective, and alcohol is a more recreational drug, so to speak. Of course, you have beers, you have wines, you have barley wines, and you have whiskies and all sorts of other high alcohol content beverages. And what happens with this is, again, we get to a state where if somebody's drunken so much that they get paralytic, again, the soul has to get out. And it goes out, as with, and I didn't mention it with the drugs, but it gets out through the crown chakra area. It goes out there and has to stay out. But with the alcohol, it does stay literally very close to the gross physical areas. So it's sort of in this halfway state between the lower astral, which is the fourth frequency, and the combination of the first three frequencies, which creates the gross physical. And again, that state, they can see astral entities. They can see entities that are slightly higher frequency, that are incarnate vehicles for other souls that may be visiting here and may be abhorrent to us as human beings. But moreover, though, this particular form of ejection is usually not disharmonious enough to allow, let's call them stray souls that have left their incarnation but still think they're alive, still haven't understood that their body is dead and they need to move on back into the energetic, back into the multiverse, commune with their guide and their helpers and their true energetic self, and go through what we call a life review program, which is understanding what they've done, how they've done it, how the guide and helpers have helped them, and whether they've achieved what they wanted to achieve, and how they've evolved as a result of it. So they move out of the body, but this leaves the body open, and these stray souls who want to experience life still, incarnation still, dive into the body. And this is when you start to get a change in personality from the person who's usually a very nice individual, but when they've imbibed too much alcohol and they get paralytic, and they suddenly maybe they go to sleep, or maybe they go to sleep for a moment, and then they start to get a really nasty personality, is because it's not them. It's another soul who's trying to become incarnate. They're experiencing the disharmony of the body, and so it makes them angry. But they still want to stay in the body for as long as they can do, even though it's disharmonious to them. It actually could be quite painful energetically. So they get very, very angry, and they pick fights, and they say angry words and throw things around and do all sorts of crazy things that the original primary animating soul would not do. But however, when the alcohol starts to wear off and the body starts to come back out of disharmony, the soul, this stray soul that's in there, that's temporarily occupied, temporarily walked in, can't stay there, because there is then a complete disharmony between this temporary soul that's walked in and the body, because the body is tuned, of course, as an association, a long-term association with the primary animating soul, the soul that incarnated into it at the point of gestation. So it has to get out as well, and as it becomes, obviously it has to get out. The anger factor kicks in even more and more, and then they might start to go to sleep again, and then the primary animating soul comes back in again, and maybe in the morning they have a hangover, but it's the same nice person or the same personality that was there before they got drunk. So the moral of this is that alcohol or drugs, whether they're natural drugs like ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, or the herbs etc., or whether they're synthesized pharmaceuticals, psychedelics, is only a temporary way of experiencing something just above the frequencies associated with the gross physical. It doesn't allow you to go really far. So the way to go really far is to meditate. The only way to create a robust, repeatable, and reliable way to connect with the greater reality is to meditate. You can use Kriya Yoga to get there. You can use some of the Buddhist meditation techniques. You could use even my traversing the frequencies techniques. Whichever way you wanted to. You could use Om technique. You could use Hong Saw technique. Any of these well-tried and tested meditative techniques will, with dedication and devotion and continued practice, allow you to move your consciousness, your sentience, out of the body into the greater reality through the frequencies of the physical universe into the frequencies that create all the multiversal environments within the multiverse. And when you get good at it, I mean, eventually it'll take a long time to do it, and it'll take a long time to get there and a long time to get back, as it did with me and other people who've mastered it. But once you've done it, it gets easier and easier and easier, and you can be connected all the time. So you're always in a state of samadhi, so to speak. You're always in a state of connectedness. You're always one with Source, and the Source is always one with you. So if you want to experience the greater reality, if you want to experience an expanded state of consciousness, meditate. Avoid the use of too much alcohol. Avoid the use of any synthesized drugs. Avoid the use of any plant-based psychedelics. Okay, let's go to the questions and answers. Well, thank you everybody for joining this satsang in August. We're pretty much 2/3 of the way through the year. Thank you very much. And thank you to Ola for her hard work, and also for her latest question, which is a completely new direction. In vitro fertilization. The eggs are fertilized in vitro in the lab. Only 30 to 50% of them grow to the blastocyst stage in 5 to 6 days. The rest die out due to chromosomal abnormalities or other problems. This is considered normal attrition. In IVF, is it one soul splitting itself into more than one embryo to put the energy system in place, or is it more than one soul involved? Like one soul per viable embryo. Does the abnormal embryos die in a day or two because they're not energized by the soul? When we're in the energetic, we know everything instantaneously because we're a much higher frequency. So that which is considered to be linear here and happens, per second, so to speak, is happening in instantaneous conditions. So everything that is, could be, is, will be, etc., happens in the now. So a soul knows which physical fertilization is going to work and which isn't. And so the souls that are going to work with a particular fertilized egg will enter into that egg. So it could be the same soul split into 2 or 3 to give the twinning or the triplet effect or quadruplet, or it could be one soul per egg. So in effect, there's no wastage in terms of or no attrition in terms of the soul entering into a potential vehicle and then having to get out. It's simply a function of they know which eggs are going to work, and they work with those particular eggs, and then that becomes the gestation and the creation of the embryo. Okay, so I hope that answers the question. Jagjot's got a bunch of questions. There is the mind, and then there's sometimes we feel emotions. Is the feeling aspect part of mind construct or sentience? Where is this feeling located? How are mind and feeling related? It's the feeling body's biochemistry. Mind and emotions and everything associated with sentience is associated with the soul, which I'm told to call as a smaller aspect of the true energetic self, or higher self, or of the soul, or in Hindu texts, the Godhead. They all mean the same thing. But in terms of where is sentience focused in the physical form, it's focused in a place called the soul seat, which is in a location behind the plexus where the heart chakra is. So it's not part of the heart chakra. It's in more in towards the center of the chest. So that's where it is. So things like feeling, emotions of many types, thought processes, knowledge, memory, etc., is within the soul, in the soul seat, which is behind the heart. Okay, another question. It is said that past life karma follows you to the next life, something as sometimes as physical body defects are blamed on genes. How is the past life trauma executed physically? Does one get birth in a lineage where there is a physical DNA defect, or the body gets a defect because of the energetic signature that it brings with it because of the past life karma? Well, usually there's a function of karma which is associated with the past life where there's been a certain way of demising, or for example, it could have been betrayed in some way, working with another soul where there's been a desire to feel betrayal or experience betrayal as the betrayer and the betrayed. But in the instance where we get issues with physical forms, the soul knows that of the potential problems, or the problems that will manifest as a function of a particular body and its genome. So in essence, there are going to be issues where a soul will enter into a body that's going to definitely be deformed in some way. It might be paraplegic, it might be quadriplegic, it might be having all sorts of different functions such as ADHD, Down syndrome, all these different things, or even cancers. The soul knows this, and although it seems a bit bizarre from a human perspective, it doesn't matter to the soul as long as it gets some form of evolutionary progression. But in terms of certain issues associated with the body, like pains in the neck or pains in the back, or suddenly we get pains in the side, there are times when we have an association or a link with a past life that we've had where we've demised in a certain way, and that trauma's come through with us as let's call it a fear, or a worry about experiencing something, or a lack of detachment from that way in which we have demised, or the body has demised in that previous incarnation. Now, generally, they stay in the background, and it won't manifest unless there was a trigger point in the current incarnation, which is similar to the experiences of the past incarnation. And so that trigger point then creates a condition where that link is activated, and maybe the person's been hung, or has had the head chopped off in a previous incarnation, or they've experienced death by spear, or all sorts of other things, or accident, plane crash, car crash, being knocked over by something, or being crushed in rubble. All of these different things will stay in the background unless there's a trigger point, and that trigger point is usually something which is very similar in terms of the experience and the circumstances surrounding how that soul experienced that particular demise. So there's two things there. One is it can be a trigger point, and two is it's a natural function of the body that has got a defect in it, and the soul's not particularly worried, but it enjoys the evolutionary experience associated with that defect. Again, it's a strange concept for us as human beings in this state of low frequency interaction to understand this, because we tend to see the human body as our temple, what we are. Next question from Jagdot. There are lots of videos of Tesla cars around technical graveyards catching and displaying human presence on screen, but in reality there is nobody. Is it possible all these sensors and cameras are catching human spirit presence? I want to thank you for all the work you're doing to uplift people, and eagerly awaiting for your next book on the origin. Please advise when it's expected. Well, the book is in the final stages of being reviewed by publisher, Ozark Mountain Publishing. Usually they accept the books if they're of the same genre. With the World Satsanga books, they didn't, because they didn't understand how to market a series of books which were lectures, with the book 5 that Ula's working very hard on. the transcriptions of meditations, but most of it is a function of questions and answers. They didn't know how to market that, so they humbly refused it, which gave us the chance to do it faster through Amazon. But in essence, it's going to be, I would guess, around March to May next year, because it takes once they approve it, they've got to go through a whole series of editing processes and the creation of gallery prints to enable it to be printed. So it'll be another 6 to 7 months, I guess. Right. These things about Tesla cars is nonsense. It's people putting it on the internet, just causing misinformation and causing conjecture. I would ignore it. A lot of this stuff is basically people playing with people's minds and causing fear factors, or trying to create a following of some sort, so they can broadcast more misinformation and get a level of status. And so eventually they'll come up and say, you believed all of this, but I created it. It's nonsense. So they're really trying to trip people up. So just I would ignore it. Ula's got next question. Is there an energetic basis for kidney stones? What can we do about it? Basically, kidney stones are a function of our poor diet. Usually too much salt or too many minerals, but they can also be a function of stress as well. So if we can digest foods that would naturally break up the manifestation of minerals, or stones or calcium, those sorts of things, then that's the way associated with it. So there's no energetic basis other than the food in which we take or we imbibe or eat, and how the body responds to it. Again, it's things like fatty livers. Those are another manifestation of incorrect diet. Things like high blood pressure, low blood pressure, high cholesterol levels. Again, it's all a function of diet. So although we have the potential to look after our bodies properly, we generally don't. We drink too much, we eat too much, we eat and drink, usually these days, food that is pre-prepared for us. We buy it in a box in a supermarket and put it in a microwave. We don't do that in our house. Celia's an excellent cook and does things from scratch, as you were supposed to do, as we used to in the old days up until recently. So you can see from the TV, if you look at any old situation comedies or series, that anybody from the 60s and 70s, they're skinny. And that's because at that point, the archetypical TV dinner or preserved and pre-prepared food wasn't available. People went to the grocers, they went to the fruitiers, they went to the butchers to get their food, and they cook it themselves. So it was pure. There was no preservatives, and that's why we get all these different problems. And kidney stones are probably a function of preservatives as well. Daniel's got a question. Is castor oil a good product to use on joint pain, bone problems, and skin disorders? Any sort of oils that are natural to the body are good in some way, shape, or form. Cod liver oil, although it's the use of cod's liver, the fish, is very good for the joints. Also, so is olive oil. So, and olive oil is also very good for the skin as well. So it's one of the things to do is look for the oils, natural oils that the body is naturally going to function correctly with. And so rather than things that's they're there just with the title oil, look into the depth and detail, and you'll find out that which oils are best for the body. And some things like cod's liver oil are actually very good for the heart as well, and for heart function. So just have a look around and see. I would suggest cod liver oil and olive oil, basically. Right, next one. What is the state of affairs? Are we improving or falling deeper into the pit? Is there anything more we can do to move the consciousness on the planet towards higher realms? My understanding is that we are bottoming out. And actually, there's an interesting question from one of my readers who's stated that the same sort of question. And how I answered was, after a meditation or a quick channel of information, is that we are starting to turn the corner. Our descent has flattened out, and we're starting to understand that we need to think, behave, and act, specifically behave and act in a different way to what we are now. And the lecture in the next two satsangas are going to be about creating a checksum, a way of checking how we elect leaders, and then how we move into a different state of beingness, where we're into not communism, but being in a collective in collectivism, basically in a collective consciousness, or thinking about how our thoughts, behaviors, and actions affect others, and that's sort of self-governance. And so we're starting to move into that zone. And I've seen a few things that are and a few dialogues or announcements by certain individuals in authority who make me feel that that sort of concept is permeating through them and is being absorbed by their soul in this frequency level. So their guide and helpers must be working with them in some way to help to try to change the direction we're going into. Number 3, it seems there is much polarizing. How do we get so deeply to the right or left opinion on how to manage or govern this planet? It seems we have been at it for so long, we should at least be getting it more correct. I agree. In effect, what happens is we're affected by population. The greater the population, the more things swing from side to side because there's more weight behind the concepts. If you think about how we were 200 years ago, we had not even a fifth of the population we have now. In fact, in the First World War, we had a fifth of the population we have now. So think of it 200 years ago, I think it was less than, it was a half of that. So we were getting close to the Middle Ages, were around 750 million worldwide, and now we're nearly 8 billion. But it's the weight of consensus that creates the change. And it's also the triangulation of that consensus. As people communicate with each other, they group together in similar or same thought processes. Birds of a feather flock together. So if we have a number of individuals who have right or left wing tendencies or middle of the road tendencies, and they seem to be attractive to a lot of people, then you start to swing from one side to the other side. The issue is that sometimes those individuals who would have been more middle of the road are sometimes swung one side or the other side because there are elements of the dialogue or the rhetoric of one side or the other side that rings true in the middle as well. And so they start to see that, and then they start to see middle of the road people go into one side or the other side. And so what we need to do is to create a different dialogue where the middle of the road is attractive to everybody and not the massive right or the massive left. But mostly the massive right and massive left are a function of the high percentage of backfill people we're getting, which are a different quality of sentience, and they're attracted to low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions because in most instances this is the only incarnation they're ever going to have on this planet where they've got individualized free will, because they're used to having or being in like a hive mind or a collective function where they don't have this level of individuality at all, or if they have individuality, it's much more collectively governed, so to speak. Right, so Eliza's just asked a question. Please remind us what radius our soul frequencies have when we meditate in higher frequencies. How far can the impact go? Depends upon the limitation of thought. With the traversing the frequencies, we can go to the highest frequency associated with the highest universe in the multiverse. And so the limitation is basically within the mind or within the soul, not within the potential for what we can do. We limit ourselves through our lack of understanding of what we can do. We create a belief system, and belief systems are limited in their own right because they tend to be associated with us accepting or creating the possibility that an individual of authority is right, even though we haven't experienced it ourselves. And so that in itself is a limitation. So until we start to experience things ourselves through meditations, we'll always be limited. If people get to a certain level of connectivity in meditation and think they've made it, well, that's because the ego gets involved and says, whoa, I don't want you becoming self-aware again because I need to be here and be the dominant with a dominant personality. So usually it is a case of the ego getting involved and starting to put doubts and fears in our minds and worries. How many people have tried to do astral travel and they've been scared? That's the ego, because once you start to astral travel, you move out of this particular low frequency into a slightly higher frequency, and your communicative bandwidth increases, and then you start to understand who you are and start to seek higher frequencies. So the multiverse is our oyster, and that's the radius, provided we know we can do it. Don't believe, we know. Ula's got another question. What energetic template holds our past life information, or is it all of them? The past life information is not really associated with any energetic templates. It's associated with the true energetic self, the higher self, and the communicative bandwidth between the true energetic self and the smaller aspect of sentience that we call the soul that's projected into the physical. So that information is stored there, and that information for all of the different smaller aspects or souls or shards that are projected into any part of the multiverse is also stored there. So if we can access our true energetic self or higher self or oversoul, we will be able to also access all of the past life information we've had. Now, notice that the past life information we've had as a human being is stored in a particular location in the sentience of the source, called the Akashic records. There are other records for other physical forms that our souls have occupied, and we occupied countless thousands of different variants of souls that are able to house sentience. So there's lots of different pigeonholes, if you like, or sectors within the sentience of the source that is associated with all of the different incarnations that we've all had, and those are the souls and true energetic souls that we're not even conscious of, that have experienced incarnation as a human being on Earth, as a human being, and these different variants in other locations, and in other form factors, in other planets, in other frequencies, in other galaxies within the physical universe. Okay. Right, Daniel again, number 4. How we lost sight of what and why we are here on this planet in the physical. It seems there is much concentration on acquiring physical wealth and all things physical, and away from the spiritual, when in truth we can take nothing with us except our experience. That's right, there's no pockets in shrouds. Our experience, strength, and hope. Physical wealth here probably does not equate to anything in the spiritual realm. Is this true? It's what we do here that matters, not what we think about, but what we actually do. We're measured by what we do and how we've done it in terms of how that relates to our life plan, which is basically a series of goals. And our free will is how we achieve those goals. If we end up being a significantly wealthy individual, it's what do we do with that wealth? Does that wealth own us? Do we seek more wealth? Do we seek more powers associated with the wealth? Or do we end up giving it away, or trying to create trusts or things where the wealth that we've accrued is going to do good for people? There's lots of people who are very, very wealthy who give money away. And Keanu Reeves is one, for example. He gives lots of his wealth away. Bill Gates does. Jeff Bezos does. Mark Zuckerberg do. All these wealthy individuals are individuals who can give wealth away in our own way, and in our own ratio, dependent upon our own personal wealth. We can also give things away. And I give physical things I've owned away to people rather than charge them for them. Sometimes I sell them, of course, but usually I give things away. I also donate around 10% of my income a year to various different charities, and sometimes I rotate those charities. Another thing, I've just taken on board another child or sponsor of a child with World Vision as well. So there's lots of different ways in which we can be, active in sharing our wealth. So our wealth and how we work with it, how we give it away to somebody in the street, for instance, or we help somebody buy a train ticket to go home, is a function of how giving good or giving goodwill or good service to people. But the thing is, do these objects own us, or do we own the objects? Or do we just use those objects as something we can use to navigate through this incarnation? And the last part there, how we can use these things to navigate through this incarnation and do good things, is what it's all about. accruing wealth it doesn't mean anything at all, really, unless we can do good with it. Okay. Next question from Daniel. Will this be a terrible election cycle here in the United States that will have an effect on the entire planet? Will we at least achieve more effective leadership? How can we make this happen? In essence, the next lecture I'm going to do, not part of this Satsanga, but another one, is about making sure that we as mature individuals can ensure that we get a mature individual to lead us. And so that's is going to be something which is going to be manifest as a function of some of the recent or near future, so to speak, elections that are going to happen, because we're going to find out that we need to be more mature, and the election of certain individuals around the world is going to be a wake-up call for us. So the wake-up call is going to be something where we start to introduce something called a checksum, where if we vote for certain individuals in certain locations and they come to the fore, and eventually there's the individuals who drop off result in 2 or 3 individuals who are going to be in the final race, and actually these individuals aren't capable of being in positions of power, then the checksum is that they disappear, and a new group of individuals are invited to go into the race. But that's for later on. Last question from Daniel. A job in politics and in leadership seems to produce huge wealth. Will these corrupt politicians be called to account soon? Absolutely. Absolutely. In the old days, and this wasn't always the case, but in the old days, a politician was somebody who was a businessman who'd done extremely well out of using others or employing others to create a business and provide a product. And they wanted to increase the ability to be successful. And the way to do that was to reform society, introduce sewage systems, piping systems, cleanliness, hospitals, create the national health in some instances from the UK perspective. All these different things where reformers worked, increasing the road, making better road systems, rail systems, were the function of people who were successful, and the only way they could put these things through or change the way we think, behave, and act was to be a politician. These days, a politician is basically a job, and people who go into politics go straight from university, and they haven't got a clue about how to manage themselves, let alone how to manage local government or a whole country. That's not strictly true in all cases, but it seems to be quite a thing. So again, at some point, there's going to be this checksum where we start to make sure that we elect those individuals who are actually mature enough to take these places, and that we're mature enough to understand who those are. So that's important things. Maybe that we don't elect them. Maybe we are governed by some other function. Maybe we use AI in the correct context to be able to make sure that we have the right individuals in the right places to do the right level of service for us. Because it's about being of service, not about making lots of money and being in status. It should be a calling. Eliza just said, you recently said there's a high percentage of backfill people on the planet now. Were they always here, or was there a time period that marked them coming to the planet? They weren't always here, but they started to come to the planet when we started to rise up the frequencies, and people started to, in a more accelerated way, ascend from being in the group of 3 frequencies we call the gross physical, and started to move into the 4th. And so there needed to be a stable population on the earth so that other individuals didn't, say, why is everybody disappearing? So they came onto the planet to backfill for those who have ascended, which would have been around the late 50s, 60s, 70s. And then more and more came on board and have come on board. And so in essence, they've been there for the last 50 years, I guess, in smaller numbers. And now it's increased. I think my current understanding is they're around 58%. They will increase without doubt. And there's a maximum. I think I've already stated a maximum number of backfill people in one of the previous Satsangas. But it can't go above a certain figure, because as you can see the chaos we're in now, it would just revert us back to being cave people if they took over and became like 90% of the population of the earth. That wouldn't be possible. Okay. Next question. When we experience emotions or the remnants of a previous incarnation, is that predetermined in our life plan? Which previous incarnations tend to affect us now? Atlantean or the Lemurian? Again, it's a function of trigger points. If they're emotions that create a condition where we start to experience physical dysfunction or physical disability, for example, or even mental disability. Sometimes we have a number of different trigger points that allow us to become not spontaneously, but progressively, sometimes spontaneously, though, self-aware of who and what we are. And it depends upon what we wanted to experience and how we want to be of service to others as to how much we start to become more aware of who and what we are. So if we're a higher frequency, we tend to have a higher communicative bandwidth, and that can be achieved in an incarnation where we use meditation or other functions such as Kriya Yoga, traversing the frequencies, and other things that allow us to climb the frequencies, and in effect open up the possibility of increased communicative bandwidth. In which case, we do start to get the possibility of getting glimpses of past incarnations and past lives and past experiences. And Eliza says, I've had this experience where I suddenly notice totally new types of positive people in my neighborhood. Could I have shifted into a new reality, or I'm just noticing this because my frequency is higher? When we're in a higher frequency, we still occupy the same space, but the perceptual range of those in a lower frequency means that they don't see us or they don't perceive us, because the physical eyes observe what the spiritual third eye is capable of perceiving. So if you're a higher frequency, you'll suddenly start to perceive those and potentially see them with your physical eye that are of a higher frequency, but in the same space. But you'll find that other people don't know they're there. So ask a few people who you can classify as being lower frequency, whether they see these people as well. And you'll find they won't, because they're not capable of seeing them, because they're not the right level of frequency, or that they're not evolved enough to be able to see that. So yes, it's a function of being a higher frequency. Yara says, what is evil and why, if you could kindly elaborate on the devil, Satan, demons, etc. I feel there's a serious gap in my understanding, especially that my thoughts regarding the biblical story was, dude's got a point, and any of us would do the exact same thing exclusively in terms of facts that were mentioned in regards to that story. Well, basically, my understanding is that and it'd be best to read the history of God, because he explains it there, that what the devil was. The devil was basically an individual who was part of the council of entities that were here to govern the potential for accelerated evolutionary progression through using individualized free will on this particular location, in this particular frequency. And one of the things that was withheld from this council was the prediction of the potential to drop through the frequencies, not just continue to increase the frequencies. And so that individual was classified as being low frequency, not the devil, because they withheld information about the potential for us to drop down the frequencies. And clearly we have dropped down the frequencies. So the potential for this happening was right. And so things like demons, etc., are classified as being part of the devil, or low frequency existence. But in real terms, all demons are astral entities who are using our own fears to detract us from observing them. So if you think about it, if somebody doesn't like a snake, they'll look away. If they don't like an arachnid or any form of insect, they look away. So that's the protection function they have, of making sure that those who are bordering on the potential to see things in a higher frequency are not seeing astral entities who are there and potentially taking energy from us, from our chakras, or from feeding off some of the residual energies, or the waste product of the metabolization of energy being brought in from the chakras to energize a particular energy template associated with, which is one of the auric layers. So in essence, it's an incorrect statement. The Bible's not right at all, because it's trying to explain something in a way that we would understand. And in essence, the word of the devil is being used as a way to explain the the potential thoughts, behaviors, and actions associated with low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions. So there's no such thing as evil as such. It's just a lower frequency way of existing. And if we can make sure that we exist in a higher frequency way, that we can be more godlike or more and create a like heaven on earth, basically. So evil doesn't exist, but we have to realize that we have to manage ourselves better in a mature way, just make sure that we don't have low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions. We're down to 5.5 minutes, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to manage all the questions here. What is the resolution for that? Is in the new earth, the new earth we aspire towards, especially with the notion of duality and polarity? The new earth is basically the next frequency up. Same old earth, but a higher frequency. What I'll do is I'll send a link to an article I wrote about my understanding of the new earth and also the associated presentation, because if we can move up into the next frequency, we realize that's who and what we are, and we won't behave in ignorance, basically, which is low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions. So that means we won't do any bad things to people, any negative things to people. Next question: why do we villainize the ego? And I understand why, seeing as I've been living in it. I mean, isn't there a reason for that is an integral part of being human? We ought to aspire instead to befriend and harmonize with it, and using its power to our favor in the most aligned manner. How do we go about that? The ego, again, what I'll do is I'll send a link to the to the article I've created about the ego. The ego is a temporary personality that's created as a function of our incarnation into a low frequency environment, where our communicative bandwidth is reduced down so low that we start to lose communication with our higher self, and therefore we start to become body associated. And that body association includes our local environment when we're in the gestation period in the womb, and when we're born, with our parents, with our brothers and sisters, our siblings, our authority figures, our teachers, our other environment. I mean, that creates a personality that's temporary. The thing is that the ego wants to be the dominant personality, and so it will keep us low frequency because it knows that it loses its dominance when the body demises and becomes a nanoscopic function of the overall personality of the soul and the true energetic self. And it also knows it loses dominance when we become a higher frequency, because we start to become not enlightened, because we increase our communicative bandwidth and we start to realize who and what we are. So from that perspective, befriending the ego is probably not the right thing to do. Observing its function and navigating around it is the right thing to do. So if we befriend the ego is going to win. If we're constantly navigating around it and observing its function and how it interacts with others and ourselves, and makes us do low frequency things such as throwing sweet wrappers out of the car window or McDonald's wrappers out of the car window, then that is a function of the way it's trying to make us accept these low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions and maintain dominance over us. Right, now next question, and probably the last question, because we got down to about 2 minutes. The question I was asking, this is from Eliza. The question I was asking earlier was about how many miles or kilometers in either direction our soul emanates energies when we meditate. I recall you saying once a radius in miles or kilometers. We basically, the energies associated with us are a function of the width or diameter of the auric layers. And if we exist in a natural state in nature, our auric layers are going to be quite large, so we have a large aura. If we're in a city that's densely populated, such as Tokyo or New York or London, then it's quite close to us. So that's a function of, basically inches or centimeters. If we meditate, we can expand ourselves ad infinitum, basically. And as I answered in the previous one, we can go anywhere. We can expand the auric layers of the body and our influence to expand through the whole of the universe. And if we wanted to, we could expand those energies into other parts of the multiverse as well. But again, it's sort of not a thing to concentrate on, because in essence, if we can expand our influence in a local environment, that's where we're going to make the most influence. So expanding our good thought processes, our higher frequencies in our local environment is going to be more effective than spreading it out thinly in like many kilometers or hundreds of miles or a whole landscape, such as a whole continent. So stick to your local area if you can do, because that will be more effective than trying to expand it into into throughout the galaxy and throughout the universe. Okay, well, we're down to the last minute, so thank you very much for your questions, and hopefully I've given coherent answers. I know we're speaking very, very quickly. Namaste to you all. And I just want to tell you that there won't be a Satsanga in September. We're on holiday, but there will be in October. So I'll let you know about the October Satsanga. So much love to you all, and sources love to you all. And think good thoughts and be of service. It's always important to be of service. Welcome to the meditation on this World Satsanga. And as we've had a lecture on why not to take drugs to get expanded levels of consciousness, and I mentioned the fact that the only way to do it repeatably and reliably and robustly is through meditation. Things like Kriya Yoga, Hong Sau, Om technique meditation, or my traversing the frequencies, or some of the other Buddhist techniques, etc., etc. I thought the best way to demonstrate some of this is to have you come with me on a traversing the frequencies meditation. So let's sit with our backs straight and our necks aligned with our backs. If you're sitting down cross-legged, again, make sure your back is straight, is perpendicular, your neck is aligned with your back. If you're sitting in a straight back chair, make sure your feet are flat on the ground. The small of your back is in the corner of the chair, and your back again is straight and your neck is aligned with your back. In both instances, make sure that your hands are palm uppermost on your upper thighs, and that your eyes are focused on the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. The focus should be gentle, not hard or forced. So what I wanted to do now is I'm going to take you to a level that I went to when I first met the Source. So this was a long time ago. So we're going to get to level 100. This is the 89th universe within the multiverse. There's 397 universes within 408 frequencies within the multiversal environment. So we're just going to go to that level and just feel the oneness with the Source. So I want you to just calm down, just slow down, and visualize, or if you can't visualize or have trouble visualizing, just speak mentally what you're experiencing or what you expect to experience. Mentally describe with your mental voice. And I want you to visualize that you're in a park, lots of grass around, lots of trees. And in this park is a lift. Strange to see a lift in a park, but it's there. And the lift door opens and I walk out. And I call you and I beckon you, wave you into the lift. And you walk towards the lift and go inside the lift. You see the lift is full of people who are participating in this satsanga. All those people who tune into it when it's first released, or are tuning into it maybe 2 years or 5 years or 10 years later. Everybody's in the same event space. So the lift, although it looks small on the outside, is actually huge on the inside. Consider it a little bit like a TARDIS on Doctor Who. It's in different frequential states concurrently. Okay, so now you're in, you turn around, and I close the door. And I press the button with the number 10 on it. Okay, I'm just going to get number 10 first, get you used to moving up the frequencies. So the lift goes from 0 to 1, to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, to 6, to 7, to 8, to 9, and then stops for a moment at 10. The 10th frequency level is the highest of the frequencies associated with the human body. The first 3 are the gross physical frequencies. The next 4 are the spiritual physical frequencies, sort of the melting pot between the energies and the manifestation of matter. And then the last 3, the 8th, 9th and 10th, are the step-down function that allows the soul to enter the body, coming from a higher frequency and gradually being funneled down to a lower frequency. But once we move past the 10th frequency, we actually move out of the association with the body. That's why I've stopped here. So I'll push the buttons again, and I push the button with the number 100. And lift rises. It goes from 10 to 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, then accelerates 25 and 30, then accelerates again 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, slows down 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and slows down again at 100. Okay. So here, the lift has stopped, and I want you to experience some communion with Source. So I'm just going to dissolve the walls and the roof of the lift. I'm going to keep the floor. So I dissolve the roof. I dissolve the front wall and doors. I dissolve the left wall. I dissolve the right wall with the buttons on for the different levels, and I dissolve the rear wall. And I call to the Source to enter us into communion. Not a total communion, just enough communion so you can feel it. You can feel the connection with the Source. And where we are, which is this 89th universe, we start to see in the distance a change in the landscape, so to speak. We start to see like an aberration, a disturbance, a ripple in the background. This ripple gets larger and larger and closer until we start to see it looking like a funnel, a whirlwind, a tornado of energy. It's full of white and gold and silver energy, rotating, pulsating and radiating. It gets closer and closer and larger until eventually it gets so close it engulfs us. This is the energy of the Source, the way in which it can enter us into communion. This energy then starts to pervade all of us. It goes into every aspect of our physicality. In between all the cells and the atoms and the subatomic components of protons, electrons, neutrons, quarks, all the way down to the very first manifestation of matter, which is the Anu. So we are totally in communion with Source. We'll just stay here for a moment just so you can feel the connectivity with the Source. Just make a note of how loving it feels. It's beyond love, it's communion. Being one is being the same as the thing that you are with. You are one with the Source, and the Source is one with you. Allow yourself to be. Allow yourself to just exist. Allow the source to be you, and the source is you. So I'm going to just let you be for the next few minutes so that you can experience true connectivity. Okay, so now we've experienced this, it's time to come back down to the earth level. So the source starts to detach, moving away from the pervasion of its energies in all of our subatomic levels. So simply this vortex of energy is just surrounding us now rather than pervading us. And it moves away from us, and then we see it move away, this huge vortex, this tornado of energy being huge, these flecks of white and silver and gold energy in the same colour energy, moving further and further away, getting smaller and smaller, till it just looks like an aberration or a disturbance or ripple in the background, and then the ripple disappears. So to come back down to the earth level, I reconstruct our lift. So I'll reconstruct the rear wall, I'll reconstruct the right hand wall with all the buttons on, I'll reconstruct the left hand wall, I'll reconstruct the front wall with the door on, and I'll reconstruct the roof. And I'll press the button with the number 0 on this time, so we come all the way down to the earth level. So we move from 100 to 99 and 98, and then it's a bit faster, 96, 94, 92, 90, and then faster, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, slowing down at 10, slowing down again to 8, 6, 4, 2, slowing down again to 1, and finally coming down to a standstill at 0. Let's stay here for a little bit just to get used to being at this level again. Okay, so I open the door and you walk out, and everybody else who's participating in this meditation also walks out. And as you all walk out, you look behind you, and my lift dissolves into the background. So slowly come back into the room that you're in. Slowly open your eyes. If you have a drink of water to help ground you, or a tea, or even coffee, weak coffee, drink that, help ground you. And just take it easy for the next few minutes and hours. You'll be a higher frequency now. If you walk in a densely populated area, they'll start to bump into you. So if you don't to drive, again, they won't see you. So they won't perceive you so much. So as you'll get bumped into when you're walking, because they won't perceive you, same thing with driving, so be careful. So that's the end of this World Satsanga in August. Thank you very much for participating and joining in. Thank you for those who gave the questions for the questions and answer session. And I'll send you all God's love and Source's love, and look forward to seeing you in the next Satsanga. Namaste. Did you see the aliens in Crete?